This video is laced with a lot of violence against children and could be sensitive to viewers. The one thing no one can stand is someone who hurts children, especially sexually. Not even criminals. Here is a list of child molesters who were instantly killed in prison.
The police on a long chase before crashing into a cop, severely injuring the officer. Snapped after Munger repeatedly teased him with details about the child's sexual assaults.
In the same cell as this dude, okay? That's like hitting the jackpot in a casino 7 times.
In KHQ exclusive story, Shane Goldsby describes the odds of what happened to him as hitting a jackpot 7 times, but...
Northern Kentucky man faces up to 20 years in prison on child sex charges.
In custody, facing child sexual abuse charges. Indiana State
charged with sexual exploitation of a minor and other crimes, leading to his 40-year sentence in prison and then ultimately to his death.
Robert Munger. Robert Munger was a 70-year-old child molester serving a 43-year sentence for violently raping children and also for possession of child pornography. Munger was on suicide watch and had been starving himself for weeks in hopes of dying of starvation. Shane Goldsby, who was serving a 5-year sentence for drugs and resisting arrest, was made to share a cell with Munger. What both Goldsby and Munger did not know was that Goldsby's underage sister was one of Munger's victims. Unfortunately for Goldsby, he found this out when Munger forcibly told him about all his victims. Goldsby, who had been a Christian and desperately wanted to change his ways, immediately went to the prison guard and requested a cell change, but was denied. Goldsby was said to have pressed the staff each time Munger provoked him by detailing what he did to his sister, but was repeatedly ignored. Eventually, Goldsby snapped and beat the already frail Munger to death. This, unfortunately, earned Shane an additional 24-year sentence.
Munger was found dead, and Shane Goldsby was sentenced to 24 more years imprisonment for this.
Liam Dean. Liam Dean was a 22-year-old from Wakefield, England, who murdered his 2-day-old daughter. In July 2017, while Dean did not sexually abuse his own daughter, he may as well have for what she endured. Dean tortured and murdered his 2-day-old daughter, Luna. Her crime? She would not stop crying. Apparently, this angered Dean enough to punch her in the face repeatedly and twist her extremely fragile body, breaking her bones and leaving her in excruciating pain. Fortunately, Dean realized his mistake and immediately called the medics. But then he lied and said little Luna had repeatedly hit her own head. The doctors rushed Luna to the intensive care unit and did everything they could to save her. Baby Luna also did what she could to stay alive, but sadly, after 3 days of fighting, she lost the battle. Of course, no one believed Dean's story. 2-day-olds can barely even move, and with the extent of her injuries, it was clear someone intentionally harmed her. Investigations began, and Dean finally confessed to his crime. He was given a 10-year sentence for the murder of his daughter, and was eventually killed by his cellmate, 29-year-old John Westland. Westland thought Dean was a sex offender and killed him with an aftershave bottle. The shocking fact was, Westland was in jail for assaulting a woman. Mitchell Harrison. Mitchell Harrison was a 23-year-old pedophile from the United Kingdom who was disemboweled and murdered by his fellow inmates in a high-security prison. This incident happened in July of 2012 at Durham's Franklin Prison in County Durham, UK. The killers were Michael Parr and Nathan Mann. As a child, Harrison made weird sexual jokes, and as he grew older, his weird jokes became dangerous fantasies. At 13, Harrison turned his fantasies into reality when he lured and violently raped a 7-year-old girl. This earned him his first run-in with the law. For this extremely serious crime, Harrison was given a slap on the wrist. He got a formal warning from the police and was sent back home. 2 years later, he had another run-in with the police after his 15-year-old classmate reported him for threatening to rape her. He got another slap on the wrist for this. 8 years later, a 13-year-old girl would suffer the consequences for the police's inaction against Harrison. Harrison had lured her into his house by offering to buy her booze and cigarettes. While in there, he forced her to strip naked and violently raped her twice. This brave girl managed to get her clothes and took off running. She reported it, and Harrison was finally arrested and charged. While in prison, He bragged about his escapades, much to the dismay of Parr and Mann. At this point, they decided to dole out prison justice to Harrison. They invited him to an empty cell where they stabbed his eye, slit his throat, and slit his stomach, causing his intestines to spill out.
His intestines fell out. They were both in for life, so murdering Harris didn't change anything.
Christian Marr. Christian Marr was born on the 2nd of November 1976. Marr had apparently been very good with computers. This hobby turned into a skill, and he became a computer science graduate. He was married and even had 2 daughters. But behind this successful man hid a dark secret. Using his skill as a computer expert, he and 9 other pedophiles came together and created an online exploitation ring that was active from 2012 to 2017. Marr and his criminal colleagues used different means to extort inappropriate images from underage girls online. They sometimes pretended to be cute teenage boys, and other times they used threats and blackmail. Together with his colleagues, Marr managed to successfully exploit over 100 girls. That is until one of their victims partnered with the Federal Bureau of Investigation to take them down in 2017. The next year, Marr and his colleagues were charged with sexual exploitation of a minor and other crimes, which led to Marr's 40-year sentence. Unfortunately for Marr, fate had other plans. On the 2nd of January 2019, Marr was beaten to death by 3 inmates in his prison facility. His killers were Adam Wright, Alex Castro, and Jason Cachego. They stabbed him 28 times and threw him down a flight of stairs. Richard Huckle. Richard William Huckle was born on the 14th of May 1986. He was a serial child sex offender who was murdered in prison. In his 20s, Richard moved from the United Kingdom to Malaysia, posing as a missionary and a photographer. He helped with church work and even earned the trust of parents. Unfortunately, Huckle's motives were extremely sinister. He started a website on the dark web called Love Zone, where he shared images and videos of himself assaulting children as young as 6 months. He even wrote a pedo manual that guided fellow pedophiles on how to stay hidden. This disgusting website of his gained so much traction that Australian and American police stepped in and started investigating who owned the account. Huckle was eventually identified, and the international officials tracked him, waiting for the perfect opportunity to arrest him. When they found out Huckle was going back to the United Kingdom to spend Christmas with his family, they alerted officials, and he was arrested at the airport. The police decided to go ahead and question him, even with the incriminating evidence they found in his laptop and hard drive. He eventually cracked and confessed to 22 counts of sexual misconduct with a minor. He was released on bail, but after his detailed confession to his mother, where he confessed to 71 horrific crimes against children, she called the police and begged them to rearrest him. On the 6th of July 2016, he was convicted and sentenced to 25 years for all 71 crimes. Nicholas Anderson. On the 22nd of January 2017, Nicholas Anderson was found dead in his cell. His attacker was Rocky Ali Beeman. Beeman was another inmate who used improvised weapons to slit Anderson's throat. Beeman was a self-proclaimed pedo hunter. He swore to kill any sexual abuser he came across until he got the death sentence. He even wrote a note to a judge, citing that he enjoyed killing pedophiles. Somehow Beeman was never put on death row. He went ahead and killed another pedophilic inmate before getting his death sentence. Theodore Dyer, also known as Ted Dyer, was a child molester who was murdered by his cellmate on the 29th of October 2014. His killer, Stephen Sanderson, could not stand sharing a cell with someone who had raped a 9-year-old girl. Dyer met the young girl in 2012 when she and her mother moved into an apartment next to his. At the time, Dyer didn't seem threatening and managed to earn the trust of the victim's mother. In fact, the mother freely allowed her children to spend time in his apartment unsupervised. But then one day the mother walked into Dyer's apartment unannounced and saw a scene from every parent's worst nightmare. Dyer was assaulting her daughter. She immediately took her children out of there and called the police. Dyer was arrested soon after. In January of 2014, Dyer was sentenced to 50 years in prison on charges of first-degree criminal sexual conduct. Unfortunately for Dyer, he would end up losing his life just a few months into his sentence. Sanderson, who had been in prison since 1999 and was sentenced to be there for life, decided to add one more crime to his list. He showed no remorse for killing Dyer. David Keever. David Keever was born in 1943. Not much is known about his childhood or career, but what is well known is that Keever was a child predator. In 1994, Keever was charged with sexual exploitation of a minor. In 1996, he was given a 13-year sentence. He was released in 2009, but he failed to register himself as a sex offender, so he was arrested again in 2010 and given another 8-year sentence. He met Jimmy Ray while serving time. In June 2019, Keever was found dead in his cell. He had been strangled by Ray, who then proceeded to stomp on his neck to make sure he was dead. When Keever's remains were found in the cell he shared with Ray, Ray showed no emotion. He just stood there while Keever's body was being transferred. The plot twist here is, both Keever and Ray were sex offenders. Ray had been in prison since 1994 for charges of sexual battery and sexual abuse on a minor. Ray was actually said to be released in 2021. The question here is, was Ray jealous that Keever got a lighter sentence even though they committed the same crime? Or was he disgusted because looking at Keever was like looking in a mirror? David Osias Ramirez. August 2019, in a jail in Jacksonville, Florida, a fight broke out between two inmates on the top floor of the building, leading to the death of David Ramirez. The facility was reserved for the most dangerous criminals in Florida, and Ramirez, having committed a crime against humanity, earned his spot there. Ramirez had assaulted an 11-year-old girl. This brave girl worked up the courage to tell her mother. Ramirez was later convicted of the crime in 2013. Ramirez met Paul Dixon, 43, in prison. Dixon had been serving time for a murder he committed when he was 17. Sometime in 2019, Dixon and Ramirez got into an argument. No one really knows what it was about, but Dixon ended up killing Ramirez by stuffing his head into a toilet bowl until he drowned. The case took a drastic turn when prison guards tried to cover up the murder. It was initially filed that Ramirez had been discharged, but the reason for the release was not recorded. The inmate who witnessed the crime refused to give a statement. He said he didn't want to be a snitch. To this day, the reason Dixon killed Ramirez has remained unknown. Jeffrey Epstein. Likely the most notable person on this list, Jeffrey Epstein, born January 20th, 1953, was a famous American billionaire, businessman, philanthropist, pedophile, and human trafficker. This man had a whole island dedicated to assaulting and trafficking women and minors. For years, Epstein committed these crimes unnoticed until 2005, when police started investigating him secretly. The federal officials on his tails found 36 women and children who had been assaulted by Epstein. He pleaded guilty in 2008 and was given a 13-month sentence for 36 counts of sexual assault. In July 2019, Epstein was once again arrested for assaulting and trafficking minors in Florida and New York. He hung himself in his jail cell on the 10th of August 2019. The examiner ruled it as a suicide. However, to this day, there is still a very long list of high-profile wealthy people who were Epstein's accomplices. This has led to the speculation that these high-profilers ordered his death and made it look like a suicide to make sure he can't expose them. While being murdered is awful, one could assume these people rightfully got what they deserved for their heinous crimes.